Hey, it's the Good Advice Show, and we're back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. Hey, thanks for joining us today. We got a great episode today. It's one of our round 2 episodes, which, if you're not familiar with that, it's when we bring back not just one of my favorite guests, but one of your favorite guests back on the podcast. And I guess I'll go ahead and reveal I am a bit biased. This actually is one of my all-time favorite guests. His name's Jonaed Iqbal. He is the founder of the No Degree podcast. It is a podcast that has over 150 episodes. It's a pretty amazing podcast. If you check out nodegree.com, you'll find out more about it. But basically, it's a career resource for people who don't have college degrees. A lot of times people think you have to go to college to be successful, and that is simply not the case. I have deeply enjoyed hearing Jonaed's perspective. He's also extremely active on LinkedIn with over 40,000 followers, and I've so appreciated following his content, which you absolutely got to do as well. Before we get into our conversation with Jonaed, we do have a quick word from one of the amazing businesses that sponsor the podcast. Hey, check this out. We'll be back soon. You know that feeling at 10 o'clock at night when you finished a long day of work and you're trying to figure out all the financials of your business? Well, the good news is you don't have to be an expert in this space. You got to just know who is the expert to call. That person is Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions, and he does business bookkeeping services better than anyone else I know. By not only helping you manage your books, he can also be the expert to help you understand your books. On top of that, he also handles payroll for businesses and really takes the worry and stress of managing all of these things so that you can focus on running your business well. So what are you waiting for? Stop wasting time trying to understand all these elements of your business. Call Steve Lay at Equity Business Solutions and he'll show you the value beyond the numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. Jonaed, it's great to have you on the show today.
Good to be here. And let me start the podcast on a negative note. So if the job of your dreams is to be a doctor,
good. Okay. Yeah.
then you need a degree.
Bro, but I love how you say that though, because I always get caught. I say something, someone's like, well, actually though. And I'm like, okay, fine.
You know what's funny? I'll be talking about like job description. And it's like when you post online, it's like you need a terms and conditions. It's like, obviously I'm not saying, hey, you're a surgeon that should not have it. But even then, I think something need to be changed and reformed, because I'm all about what's the most effective way for this person to get training, and always reevaluate current ways as we learn more things, right? Just because things were done 40 years ago, it was like, hey, this is how it's been done for 40 years. It's like, hey, what works and what doesn't work?
Well, when you came on the show a couple of years ago, I immediately liked you. I mean, the way you see business, but especially hiring, just made sense to me. Because a lot of us, like, we grow up thinking the route to your career is you got to go to college, you got to get that degree, what have you. And more importantly, like a lot of us, we went to school, we got a degree, and then we ended up not liking that industry. And then it was like, well, what do we do now? Right. Yeah. So like, I've loved your content for a long time. This is like totally separate, but you do such a great job of pointing out like the BS on social media. Like that's another reason why I love to follow your content, is because it's just like, okay, it's that, like you were posting something the other day about like your morning routine or your sleep schedule. And it just was great, you know? So you got the no degree stuff, and then you got this little bit of a little memery, a little bit of
you know what? The thing is, it's like, I've always been like a clown, you know, just like a jokester, pointing fun at things, but I like doing it in a way to like have fun while poking at things, so that even the people who do it can laugh, be like,
they're like, that's me.
That's me, kind of thing, like in a friendly way, and just to kind of go into deep insights, because I find that using humor to get points across, it really disarms and lightens the mood.
Yeah, no, right. And, you know, I personally, I really love LinkedIn. There's a lot of great content there, but there is
Bluff.
Oh my gosh, you posted something. This was forever ago though, but I mean, it was probably like 6 or 7 months ago, but you do a great job of just pointing out like the stuff that people post that it's like, I'm sure you guys listening, by the way, you've seen this. It's like the person was late to the interview. I hired them anyway. And they were they never missed an assignment. I hired the person, and you're like, but I think you posted something that like was like, oh no, then they never showed up again, or something like that. I can't remember, but
I posted like the guy never showed up, and I was like, I hope he shows up, and he posts me and all that stuff. No, because I know the people who who post that stuff, they post it once a month, like clockwork.
Right.
And if you look at their businesses, they don't have employees. So it's like, who are you hiring? Or if you're hiring, and there's nothing wrong with it. You're hiring everyone offshore, which is okay, but they're not publicly affiliated with the company, because when you go to their companies, there's like 2 employees. It's like them and their girlfriend. And that's it. So it's just not fair. And then the thing is, hiring, there's so much BS in hiring. And I agree. Look, if someone's 2 minutes late to an interview, look at the whole thing. You have to kind of look at now if they're 2 minutes late and they're rude and this and that, and okay, don't hire them. But then if they're 2 minutes late and everything else is good, it's like, okay. It's like, imagine you got the greatest sandwich ever, but it's 2 minutes late. Are you going to be that guy who's like, 4.8, 4 stars. This was the best sandwich I ever had in my life, but it came 2 minutes late. Like, no, come on.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I ordered chicken parm the other night. It's supposed to be there at 8. It came at 10:30, and it was but it was just a plate of spaghetti. It wasn't even the chicken parm. So
that's messed up.
That's where I wanted the story to go. By the way,
what? Those are the longest 2.5 hours of your life. It's like, do I order something else? Then you get upset.
And here's what was weird. We had people over, and we were like watching a movie, and they had already eaten, and they were like, should we get something for you? And I was like, no, my food's coming. And so it became this like awkward thing of like, they're like, so are you sure your food's coming? And then the movie was terrible, by the way. So then we're watching this terrible movie as I'm like slurping down spaghetti at like 10 o'clock. The whole thing was weird, but
no, you have good friends, because my friends would have been like, yo, this guy probably ate your sandwich. He's probably like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. Actually, one of them was like, make sure he hasn't refunded it, because you never know. But no, here's a question though for you. What keeps you from like getting cynical, I guess? Like when people are posting, like the story you gave, for example, of the person who posts that story, and then you look and they don't have employees. Or like for me, for example, I knew someone who posted about like how amazing their business was, and then they ended up becoming a customer of mine. And there was this weird moment of realization where I was like, dude, you haven't made a sale in like 10 months, but like you've been posting about, business is so good. And I'm like, but I didn't really broach the subject, but I was kind of like, I don't know, like, how do you stay kind of grounded with that and not like, dude, why are you lying for real?
No, you know what? I can't control what other people do. I also can't control how other people react, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of it actually comes down to users, because the users, there are people liking it, and it's like it's their fault for being a little naive. So it's like, I can't really do that, and I can't waste too much. Obviously, you always get a little cynical, but I can't waste too much energy focusing on that, because that leads to just a lot of things. So I just use that energy to come up with posts to make fun of the situation. And whenever I have negative energy, like things that I get upset, I'm like, let me go support someone. Let me go like Blake's. I haven't liked your post in a while. My bad. I haven't seen you on my feed, but I'll go like the stuff. So I approach it that way. Like, how can I make most of the situation? How can I target the people who don't like that stuff? So I go for like the funny anti crowd, more insightful crowd. That's my crowd.
Do you feel like you've always had kind of like the self-awareness of like, man, I'm feeling the negative energy. I'm feeling.
Yes. Trust me, like I have it and I know when it's happening. And sometimes I make like those bitter posts, you know, but I try to come from a point of, I don't necessarily make it when I'm feeling. There's 2 types of bitter. There's like bitter and justified. Yeah. And then bitter and the bad side about you. Because look, we're complete people. We have good, we have bad. And there's sometimes you just have to, not everything needs to be posted online. So sometimes when you're really negative, and I try to think, because like I work for a company right now. I have clients, right? I sometimes work for a friend who's a recruiter. So I have to like be balanced so I'm not hurting them. And I have employees, right? Like there are other things, like so many people don't necessarily think about certain things, where it's like there's certain things I want to post, but I also think about, will this impact the money of the workers, right? My money is one thing, but when there are other people that depend on you and you lose that money, it just leads to a lot of things. So I try to find the right balance where it's like, you want to see it. Because I've seen some people who are negative all the time, and it's like, oh, another negative post. So I find that you should have diversity. Like some should be funny, some should be satire, some should be a little more insightful in business, some should be more careers. So that way, regardless of what type of content a person is looking for, you can, cater to them at some point in time.
Yeah. And I like personally, I try not to be, it's like the whole like cliche of like everyone's like fighting their own battle or whatever.
Yeah.
I try not to be like too judge too harshly when someone's like having a bad day. But then there are those people though who like, it's kind of like you said, like everything they post is like, you're like, dude, you must be very unhappy.
Even my friends, I have a friend like all the time they post that stuff, and it's like it gets hard for me to engage because it's like it brings me down, but I want to be a supportive friend. So I tell people, make it easy for people to support you.
Yeah, so you have like, I think if I think of like the sides, you have like the or the opposites. You have the consistent negativism that just drags people down, and then you have kind of like, I don't know if it's like toxic positivity, but it's like,
you know what it is. You know what it is? It's hope porn.
Yeah.
Like it's just, so all they do is it's false hope. Because they were like, I pray that you get your job. It's like, no, they don't. Like, if someone came and was like, give me a job, and they don't go out of their way, they just hope they get the most amount of likes. They hope that post gets the most amount of views, and they hope they get a client off that post.
It's like fortune cookie entrepreneurship. Yeah. It's like someone posts a thing that's like, I know that sale's coming for you today.
Yeah.
And you're like, and actually, what's funny is one of the best pieces of advice. So I'm a Christian, and I remember my first year of business, like I was praying. I was like, God, please, like, I'm like, seriously. And the best piece of advice I got was from someone who was like, bro, God's not coming to give you a client. Like you need to go out and like get this. Like, and it was like, I realized how much I had kind of like gotten myself into like that hopium, the entrepreneurial pornography where you're just like, and then it's like, but what are you actually doing? So.
And regardless of like anyone's religious beliefs, it's like, do you think God cares about you getting a client or like that kid who just got into a car accident?
Yeah,
like, you know what I mean? It's just one of those
like
things.
When the sports guy wins the game and they're like, God really showed up for us today. And it's like, it's a football game, bro.
It's funny because I watch the UFC and I was like, I'm glad you won.
Yeah.
But
God really wanted you to win that.
He really wanted you to knock the other guy
out. That's the top. It's the top priority for sure. Kids are starving, but hey.
You have to put in the work. And I tell people, it's like, be careful about this hope content, right? All they do is post about your hopes and dreams, but there's no action. Okay. You want someone to get a client? Say, hey, I hope you get a client today. But here's what you can do. First, reach out to anybody in your network. Do XYZ. Check your emails. Be like, hey, oftentimes check your junk email, right? You never know. There may be someone reaching out to. So give someone actionable advice as opposed to, hey, I hope today's good. I hope you win the lotto too. Yeah.
Like, and why do you think people like it does feel like people are so into like the hope, the positive vibes. And for the listeners, by the way, like nothing wrong with being encouraging, by all means, encourage people, but definitely like, and here's how I see it, Jonaed, sometimes is like, I saw someone posted this, probably like 7 or 8 months ago. And what they posted was they were like, oh man, I can't believe that in 8 months, I went from being a server at a restaurant to now a multimillionaire. And it was like, you see that kind of stuff and you're like, okay, what's going on here? But what hurts me is I've had friends who've like really subscribed to that and they've dumped a ton of money and they never got the actual the tangible, here's what I do to get a customer. And then they're like 2 years later, they feel like they've wasted 2 years and they're down, like 40 grand. And it's like,
it sucks. And look, I tell people because I have my own story, but I always preface my story with, I live at home. That's why I was able to have a year where my tax return was like 14K. And then the next year, was 30K. And I'll be honest, like I started a job. I invested well over 6 figures into my business. So could I have paid myself? Yeah, but I'm also thinking about the future. But I made a total of, I averaged 30K a year for the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I was on track to make more, but then revenue went down 85%, right? So it's one of those things. I would not have been able to do that if I had kids, if I didn't live at home. So it's like, I always tell people, look, I was able to take that risk because I lived at home and I never had to worry about being homeless. If my dad had died, car accident, disabled, totally would have been different. And people have to realize their blessings, what they did, but there's also some impacts, right? If I got hit by a car and I was in a wheelchair, could I have networked the same way? if I was legally blind, there's so many factors that it's like, I realized I was privileged in these ways. Here's where I was not privileged. And here's where, right? Because life is complex. There's so many factors that play a part in your success.
No, and I think it's good advice too, because I have my brother-in-law. He has always wanted to like start like a marketing company. And it's been kind of like this conversation of like, man, I feel like I'm so slow to get after it. And I was like, bro, you have 5 kids and you're like the solo, your wife doesn't work. So, I mean, like your story is not going to be like these people you see online who are like, yeah, I'm making all this money. I mean, I hope that it goes that route for you, but it's okay if it looks a little different. So I definitely appreciate that perspective. Let's talk No Degree. I saw that you dropped a new episode on the podcast. I love that the podcast is still going. What keeps you passionate about the No Degree podcast?
Man, it's every guest I learn something new, man. I'm genuinely interested in people's story. And I realize that not only am I interested in their story, I realize that afterwards someone else can benefit. So it's like a win-win, right? Because I always get people asking me, hey, how do I become a welder? How do I become a cloud architect? How do I become a programmer? How do I become a video editor? I'll be like, oh, got the podcast. Go listen to it. And when you get those messages like, hey, thank you so much. I listened to these episodes. And yeah, man, I love people. Like one of the things I learned since being an entrepreneur, because you learn a lot of things about yourself. You learn what you don't like. You learn what you do like. You learn what you're good at. I learned I can talk to people all day. So if I had to podcast 4 hours in a day, I could do it. Like I am genuinely interested. It's something I'm excited about. And it works. So I tell entrepreneurs or even people in their careers, learn what excites you. Learn about yourself and then try to find work that can. And as an entrepreneur, you have some flexibility. Thankfully, the things that I like do make me money. But then there are other things I hate checking email, like those little admin tasks, and I suck at it.
No, yeah. It makes me think of these questions pop up a lot of like, it's like anytime like there's like a lottery, the Powerball right now is like 1.9 billion or whatever.
Yeah.
So I feel like anytime this stuff pops up, there's always the person who like, hammers at the post, what business would you start and like stuff like that. And it's always interesting to me though, because it feels like it kind of linked a little bit to like the Hopium content.
Yeah.
People are like, what's the business I would start that would make me the most money? And I love what you said just now, because I feel like more and more when I talk to new business owners or people who want to be an entrepreneur, I keep coming back to, it's really not about the quickest route to make money, but what you just said, what are you passionate about it? What are you passionate about? What are you skilled at? What do you enjoy? Because the actual route, not what social media tells you, the actual route for entrepreneurship is, what a lot of guests on this podcast have called the 10-year game. Yeah. And that's, I mean, for the listeners, 10-year game, not 10-month game. So I think the passion there is what keeps you going on those, year 3, year 4, whatever.
Yeah. And look, I have a 20, 30, 40-year game. I'm on year 8, man. Like I bought the website August 2014. So I'm at 8 years and I got a full-time job, and I was like, look, I got to get back into workforce for like another 5 years, right? If I want to get married, I want to, like, my parents are getting older, I have to start thinking about these things. It thankfully worked out. It allows me to take certain risks that I could not have taken if I were, it's funny. I increased my prices because I was like, look, I got a job. I don't need your money. And I got clients at higher prices. So have that long-term game. And like, it's so many people are so short-term, and it really hurts them because it's like, what if it doesn't work in 2 years? Are you going to stop? And it's funny because my business partners asked me yesterday, like, we bought some Powerball tickets, and they're like, yo, what would you do if you won? I'll be like, yo, I'm going to do the same thing. Like, obviously I'm going to hire like assistant, but I'm going to get a dope podcast studio. I'm going to do the same thing, just at a different level. And this is what I want to do. Right. This is what I enjoy doing. Like, the podcast is fun for me. It doesn't feel like work. Like, this doesn't feel like work, even though technically it falls under work.
Right.
And yeah, it's just,
I enjoy it. I think I do the same thing too, but I think I kind of wonder if I would like exist with less anxiety, because I'd
have so much less anxiety.
Yeah. I have my wife, we have a 2.5-year-old, and then we have a 7-month-old. Okay. And like, I'm constantly like, I'm dealing with that of like looking at the numbers. All right, did I make a sale? Did I make a sale? And I think if I was a Powerball winner, I would just do podcasting, whatever, and then just not even
Dude,
It's like whatever.
I'd like podcasts probably just full time and then work high level strategy, not necessarily. I still do some resumes just because I enjoy them and I like them one-on-one, but I would just cut out on like chasing clients, more content creation, better content creation, more strategy. Cause it's like, I like it. I like the impact that I'm having, but it took so long to figure out that you have to experiment. You have to do a lot of things to figure out what's right for you.
Well, and I think that's why I really like No Degree is because I feel like all my friends, like close friends that I went to school with, I feel like none of us are doing what we went to school for because we didn't know I got a biology degree. I was a high school teacher. And ironically enough, my freshman year, I was a business major and my advisor was like, you don't want to do that. That's basically was like, that's stupid. You shouldn't do that. So I swapped to biology because I watched the show ER as a kid and was like, sweet, I want to be a doctor, and got to be my senior year of college. And I was like, I don't even want to be a doctor. This is stupid. Well, so anyway, now I'm doing business. I don't have any kind of degree for it. You know, I never got my MBA, whatever. But point being, that's why I really like what you're doing is because I do feel like there's this like step-by-step journey of, you know, when you're 20, 21, 22, you may have no idea like what you're passionate about or your skill set. And yet like that's the end of like our educational journey, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's so true. And everybody has their own journey and education is a lifelong journey. And the beauty of education is school does not have a monopoly on education, despite what people tell you, culture tells you, and what schools tell you. You have to take in charge, read books, talk to people, learn, unlearn, relearn, and all that. So it's a long journey. And the funny thing is, let me tell you, so I own wrongdegree.com. So eventually I'm going to start a Wrong Degree podcast. So then you can come on that podcast and talk about how you got the biology degree and do something totally different.
Let's see. Is there anything on this page?
No.
Oh, okay.
You know how it is. First,
I thought it was going to be like your face or something.
Yeah, no. You know, the first thing is, you know how it is. As you give advice, right, for businesses, you want to focus on a few things.
Right.
And once you get everything in order, it's easy to start up something using the existing assets. Right. So I'm not going to launch a Wrong Degree podcast until I have like, 50 or 100K downloads per episode, whatever number makes sense. So then I already have the infrastructure and the cost. And to launch the second one is easy, right? Like when you're already successful, to launch the next one, you already know, I got my lawyer, I got my accountant, I got XYZ. So once I get No Degree, has a lot of traffic, then I'll start wrongdegree.com. That one will probably focus on, how to pivot, career pivots and all that stuff.
Yeah. And I love that concept without getting like too in the weeds on it. I love that concept too, because I've realized the things that were like totally different industries. So I was a camp counselor, then I was a high school teacher, and then now and then I was like this executive coach, facilitator person of this leadership company. And now I do like business help. And it's funny how there's some cross sections there, but for the most part, it's like, oh, I see how this skill set like carried on through things. But anyway, a quick question for you, thinking about the future, Wrong Degree, kind of where No Degrees come from. Have you seen any like big changes with No Degree in the last 8 years? Like, you mentioned that you don't do resumes anymore. Was that like the thing? And now it's like, whatever. I don't really do resumes.
No, I do resumes. I still do resumes.
Oh, you still do resumes? Okay.
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
I'm still doing them at the same rate. I'm just charging more.
Dude, resumes have changed a lot, by the way. Like I was hiring someone. They haven't?
They haven't.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just bad. I think I'm just bad at them then. Because I was hiring someone. I was like, this is way better than what I ever used.
No, but you know what? It's gotten more competitive. So people have to, like, before you could get by with like, gluing two pieces of paper together.
Yeah.
So the thing is, the resumes, like the best resumes would still be considered the best resume, because all a resume is a very simple document, and it's a document that people skim. Resumes are not read, they're skimmed. I tell people, like, I want to put everything. I was like, dude, they're not going to read everything. Focus, like, why you talk about how you saved the business $200 when you save 200K? Like, you don't need to put that. Put what's relevant and then put it in a nice way, right? Like, you do something, implement marketing campaigns and business strategies for 20 plus businesses, increasing client revenue by 20 million plus, something like that. That's what you put. And then in the interview, you can go into details. What'd you do? What kind of strategy? Oh, I realized the client didn't have automation. I realized they didn't have a CRM. I realized they weren't they had so many cold pipelines. But it's simple. Now simple does not mean easy. Simple things can be hard, right? Like not eating a donut in front or eating a cheesecake in front of you is simple. It's hard.
Yeah.
So now you got to get it outside your head. So you simplify it and you're like, what did I do? And what did it lead to? That's really all I ask. I ask, what'd you do? What do you do? Okay, what was the impact? People are like, I don't know. And I'm like, if you didn't do it, what would have happened?
Right.
How much money did you make? Did you save time? Did you make things easier? Improve? How do you quantify it? How do you know you did a good job? How would you explain to your boss? So that's really what it comes down to. So that's my ability, is to ask good questions. And then I just write a simple thing.
How do you keep like job applicants motivated when, and it's just the nature of like the job market, but like they want a job and it's like not necessarily like a genuine job posting in that it's posted, but the business kind of they already have someone tapped. It's someone internal. Yeah. They just have to post it. Like when that job applicant is on like their third, fourth, maybe fifth job, they were like, oh, I feel like this is really the one. Like, how do you keep them excited or at least optimistic?
I give them the realities. Like most people, too much hope content, I tell them it's going to suck. I tell them like, look, I'm here to maximize your chances. I can't guarantee you a job. You have to, I can give you the tools and the knowledge so you maximize your job search, but you still have to go apply. Like I have people like, I'm not getting a result. How many jobs you applied to? Oh, 6. I was like, dude, I'm not a magician. Like you want to do 6, you got to figure out, do a lot of research and cold call the right person and give them like the most famous, most glorious 2-minute pitch they've ever heard. So I tell them the reality is like, it's not going to be easy. And I tell them how to maximize their chances. Same thing, like in sales, how do you can't close every sale for whatever reason. Sometimes your customer's not ready to buy. What you can do is you could take steps that maximize your chances so that you have a higher success rate. And you have to get used to rejection. Sometimes they could reject you totally outside your control. Like my friend, he's interviewing at Google. He's like at like his 12 to 15 interview. First 3 interviews, 4 interviews, whatever. They loved him, passed. Team lost budget. Next hiring freeze. Next this happened. So it's just the reality. You have to be resilient. And I tell them, eventually you'll be relieved, and just make sure that when you're in a position to hire, that you're more transparent, that you do the things, right? That's really all I tell them. But I'm not going to tell them like, you're going to get a job next week. If you do, good. But there's so many factors.
How have you seen the job market? Like, has it changed after COVID, or like
So it's tough because during COVID, first few months of COVID was tough, just a lot of uncertainty. Then it got, really well. And then now it's very tough, especially for tech. I have a friend who's been in the market, who's been, 20-year career in tech. He said it's like the 08 for tech. Other areas still have, but here's the thing I tell people: just because it's 08, and even in the worst market, it's like, what is a bad unemployment rate? Like 20? Like 20 is like really bad, but that means like there's still job openings. It's just much more competitive. You're going to need more effort. You need to be much more polished, but there's still opportunities. So you just have to put in more work.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. And most people, trust me, man, I do resumes all the time. I have like free samples. I have free templates. And it's amazing how many people can't even format a Word document. If you can format a Word document, you're all like, literally, I understand people can't afford me, but I'll be like, hey, here's a sample, copy it, follow the template. And then they'll be like, oh, I did it. And it's not the template. It's like, dude, like I literally did it for you. And it's like, you're not getting interviews, right? So you come to me, you ask me for advice, and then you don't listen to advice. What do you want me to do? So then now I'm just sharper. Like, it's not my personality. But I'll just be like, hey, you did not do the template. It's a waste of my time to review it, because unfortunately it's not usually I'm a nicer guy, but I'm being a little more direct with certain things.
Sure.
Just because you have to set those boundaries, because then people are like, okay, I'm not going to come back until it's a certain way. And I just tell them, be like, look, I gave you a document. You're going to apply for remote jobs. You're going to do assignments or whatever. How can you expect to find a remote job? I literally laid it out for you.
Well, why do you think people sometimes don't? Is it laziness? Is it like, why don't they just don't want
honestly,
to? Or
look, it's hard because I can't even give you a proper explanation, because I would not do that. If someone gave me something, I'm going to do the best of my ability. And then if I can't make it, I'll be like, yo, Blake, you sent the template, but I really can't figure this thing out. I'm so sorry. I tried. But sometimes people, it's just, they're not ready. They're not ready. Like, they're not ready. And I tell them, it's like, you're competing with people who are willing to put in the effort. And it's just, look, the more effort you put and the more consistent effort that is proper, because there's bad effort, right? There are people who are doing, just like you can dial 400 phone calls a day, but if you're just like, hi, how are you? Will you buy my thing? You're probably not going to close a sale versus someone who does research and does 20 dials. So it's about being strategic in your efforts.
Where, over the years, like, what are some of the hiring practices that you've seen that make you cringe? Or are there anything that you're just like, bro, why are businesses doing that?
Dude, I saw someone who quit their job, was about to start, and the offer was rescinded.
After they quit their job.
Yeah.
So no.
And then they had to, thankfully they got a 6-week severance, but they had to ask. They had to be like, yo, like, I quit my job. Like, what? You can't do this. Like, how do you guys hire? Like, this is like a clown show. Thankfully it worked out. They got a better job, and the 6 weeks, gave them time, but it was just like not fair. And I've just seen so much that, again, it's just like, I tell people it's a business decision. And a lot of times businesses, they're usually in a bigger state of power, unless you're a very niche skilled that they can't find anywhere else. And so you have to make sure that you know how to handle and navigate these scenarios, and you have to be able to put your foot down. I've seen some things where it's like 5 interviews and an assignment, and it's like, I respect the people who have privilege and say, no, I'm not doing this, because then you set the tone for the market.
And I saw something, posted the other day about the whole basically taking job applicants' intellectual property and for their own benefit. And it's such an interesting conversation for you guys listening. We're talking about basically in the job application when they ask you to do like a test project or like a whatever. And I actually I did this with my social media thing, but I paid them. I said, I want you to keep it to this many hours and you will get paid for it. And it's also your content to do whatever you will with. And that came from Jackie Hermes, who was like, hey, make sure you do it this way. But this whole is interesting. I was shocked that this is actually a thing that businesses will have you do the test project, the code, the whatever, and then they will take it and use it.
Let me tell you something. I have a friend. She applied. Research paper, never got back to her. She found out they published it. It was like an investment company. They published it. I've seen it all the time. And I've seen some on Reddit where the guy's like, if I touch that keyboard, my rate is $120 an hour.
Yeah.
It's just like, find ways to evaluate portfolio and only do those things if you're serious about hiring the person.
Yeah.
If you don't have a good inclination, it's like, dude, you didn't know you did 7 interviews. You didn't know you didn't like the person. Like,
yeah.
You didn't know an interview one, or sometimes 7 interviews be like, oh, I saw one. I posted about it. Guy made it. Team loved him. Everybody loved him. CEO and HR blocked him because he didn't have a degree. This was a program manager job. He had the experience. He could do the job. And CEO, dude, I would, if I was rich enough, I'd go punch him in the face. But I can't do that. But yeah.
It blows my mind that, and Reddit, by the way, is it's tough. I have to be really careful, like what I reshare from Reddit, because honestly, like, I'm always very suspicious how real it is. But sometimes you come across stuff on Reddit that you're like, bro, there is a business owner out there who really believes this way, or like who really thinks this way. And it kind of blows my mind.
Yeah. And you know what the difference is? There are 2 types of business owners. There are business owners who believe they own their employees.
Yeah.
And there are business owners who believe that they work that their employees are the ones who benefit the business. You see the styles in leadership, you see how they look, and I've seen it, you probably seen it. It's very hard to change someone who believes that they are higher than their employees. Like, I believe that we're on the equal plane, or they're higher than me. Like, I call my team member, she's an online business manager, but I say she's my boss. Like, she'd be like, hey, Jonaed, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I respect her opinion, and I put it in a way that, they still be like, hey, I don't know how to say this, but, and it's always going to be that, because there's a dynamic, right? That there's, unless someone that really doesn't care, but most of the time there's a power dynamic, and you want to show that, hey, I'm using this power for good. Just realize that I'm here to serve. And I always make thing where it's like, hey, look, if I ever am in a financial position where I can't afford to pay you, I'm going to make sure I give you ample notice. I'm going to support you in every shape or form, and I'm here for you. I'm not going to just be like, hey, look, I'm, because she's like, look, if you can find someone cheaper, I understand. I was like, look, I'm not here to save like $5-10. In the business thing, in the grand scheme of things, like you're trying to save $5 to $10 and you lose out on thousands. I said, look, I'm here for you. And also I'm here to also realize that if there's another opportunity that's better for you, that's perfectly fine. I understand, I wish you the best, and I'll, make the transition easy.
Well, I think about like man, what a shocker of a concept to give like dignity to your employee. But like, I just love how like it kind of blows my mind, man. And I know we're running out of time, so I'm trying to be long winded with this, but it literally blows my mind when we talk professional relationships and how unprofessional businesses are sometimes. Like a friend of mine was quitting a job. He was quitting the job. Actually, at first he was going to scale back his hours, and like over the years they had just put more and more on his plate.
Yeah.
Well, he was quitting his job to be a stay-at-home dad. He felt like he had never saw his kid. His kid didn't know him. So it ends up, he's like, hey, I'm actually going to be quitting at the end of the year. And it was, I guess now it's November. It was like around September, October that he says this. He's like, hey, I'm going to be quitting at the end of the year to be a stay-at-home dad. They freaking like made him out to be this. They were pulling up stuff that they had written down of like, hey, you stole hours from us. Like you were clocking in at times that you weren't really here. And he was like, no, I wasn't. I never did that. And basically like built this case against him and then fired him. Oh. And he was like, this is insane. I've worked there for 8 years, have done like so many extra hours, but what ended up happening was the business owner basically was like, yeah, I was super pissed off that you were quitting. Like you did this to us. Like you put us in a really tough spot. But so hearing that versus your story, I'm like, it just blows my mind, man. I'm just like, just treating people with dignity and like professional respect. And yeah, you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid here. If you go find another job, that's fine. Like I keep getting surprised, I guess, by
I don't get surprised. Like obviously it's surprising, but some people really, they're big on the hierarchies. Like, hey, I pay you, you owe your time to me. Like you can't.
I did you a favor by giving you a job. Yeah. Whatever.
Yeah. So it shouldn't be like that. It should be like, hey, we both benefit. I want you to provide value for me. How can I create an environment where you can do that?
Yeah.
And the thing is, they could have just said something like, hey, you know what? If you want to be a stay-at-home dad, do you mind like, can we work out a consulting arrangement where we kind of work in where you could do that? We'll pay for a babysitter if you need to, or you could do the transition.
No, they're too cheap for that.
Like, you know what? I can do that. Like, that's all it had to be instead of like making a case and all that. Now let me tell you, your ex-employees are your biggest advocate because they can be honest about it. He could have been like, yo, his friend, he could have been like, hey, do you know a replacement? And he wouldn't refer someone bad because here's the thing about referrals. Like when you sent me that, like, hey, I'm hiring someone, I thought of the best person that I know. Like, hey, this is who I would recommend. I'm not going to think of it like sending someone bad because I remember I was referring someone and I told him, I was like, yo, what's the rate? What's your rate? This is the rate she's paying. Are you good with that rate? He was like, yeah. He goes to the interview. He says like a rate double. I was like, dude, it's okay to have whatever rate you want. Yeah. You told me this rate. You can't go in.
That feels bad.
Rate. I was like, we agreed. And I was like, now I will never refer you again. I was like, that's simple it. You could have said no, and I still would have respected you. But it's those things. So it's like we have to be mindful of the referrals because we're putting our reputation on the line.
Well, you make a good point though, because we love like our dog veterinarian, and I ran into someone who I didn't know used to work at that place.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, so tell me what's going on. Like, what did you think about that job? And she was like, it's the best job I've ever had. Like literally. And like that gave me so much confidence as a buyer to be like, okay, like I can trust this place now because here's a former employee who's like, it was awesome.
Yeah. No, it's one of those things. Like other times, like I'll tell people, look, like there are certain companies I used to work for. Only one company. It's like a big company. So on my LinkedIn, you can probably figure it out. I'll be like, look, they're okay for a career, but I was like long term, like if you want to transition and stuff, it's like a big boring insurance company. No one's gonna be like, right. If you have like a tech company, I would tell you to go that. You have more flexibility, more culture, but just realize that it's a business. There's transactionals and it's a big org, and that's really it. If it works for you, good. If not, cool.
Yeah, good advice. Jonaed, I know we're out of time. Bro, man, this always goes by so quick. I mean, it's so great having you on the show. I guess I'll see you again in 2 years.
We'll you can do more. You could do 12, whatever.
Yeah, anytime. We'll check the pacing. But for people listening who want to like immediately they're thinking, I want to follow you, I want to connect with you. What's your spiel? What's the next step for them?
Yeah, so look, check me out on LinkedIn. I'll give you the link you have in the show notes. Twitter, I'll give you that. No degree DOTCUM. And on Twitter, I'm a little spicier because LinkedIn, I still try to be a little more, but Twitter, I'll like curse and I'll be funnier. I'm on Twitter Spaces a lot, and yeah, so Twitter is like faster moving.
Wow, you're the one person who uses Twitter Spaces. That's great.
Yo, Twitter Spaces is so good. That's how
I know that creators are big on it. Actually,
it's so good.
But I didn't know anything about it until like most recently. But
no, it's so good.
Anyway, I'm just razzing it.
Yeah, no, so many good people, and I've met you. Oh, I got my job off a tweet. Think about it. I did so many LinkedIn things, so many things. I got a job off a freaking tweet. Like I so many applications, and it's like Twitter who came through. So it's just funny how things work. But yeah, Twitter. Those are the best ways, and feel free to reach out. If you've listened to me on the podcast, just say, hey, I heard you on this podcast, and I'll do my best. If I ever don't answer, send me another message, just because I get so many, you know how it is, so many people just trying to pitch me and all that stuff. So it's not
people pitch you on LinkedIn, really? Wow. No, I'm just kidding.
So check out the No Degree podcast, where I interview people without college degrees. It's on your favorite platform, or go to nodegree.fm where you can check it out.
Love it. And for the listeners, I'll have all those links down in the episode description below. Jonaed Iqbal, dude, you are the freaking man. It was so great to have you on. Thank you for saying yes and coming on the show again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Hope the audience benefited, and looking forward to doing this again. Hopefully in 2 years, not 2.5, 2 years.
Yes, we'll just slowly keep bringing it in.
Yeah.
Hey, for our listeners, thanks for tuning in to the podcast today. Don't forget, you can check out more on our website, on our LinkedIn, and on our YouTube channel. And if you enjoyed the episode, you never really checked out the podcast before, what the heck you waiting on? Click the subscribe button so you keep getting good advice wherever you are. And don't forget also that we do have a Patreon for the podcast. You can go to patreon.com/goodadvice if you want to support the podcast. Other than that, that's today's good advice. We'll catch you later. See ya.